everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Happy hump day to you. Happy Wednesday. Yes, what are we doing today? That's what we're doing today. And do you know what that is? That is what is called a Jewel Box Quilt. Super love it. Not too hard. It only deals with two different blocks, your 4-patch and your half square triangles, to make this gorgeous quilt. Now, I will tell you current state. Notice there's no borders. Current state is 48.5-inch squared. Okay. We are going to do something, and I'll talk about that later at the end of the video. We're going to do more. However, just like with all the other quilts, I have done a supply list along with a coloring sheet, and that can be obtained free. All you do is go to the inspiration tab on our website, and the link for it will be down below. So all you have to do is click down in the description box. But I want to tell you, what did I use? I started to, and I did, the topper is made with a 10-inch square pack, and it's from Poppy Cotton, and it's Chickadoodle-Doo is the name of the line. So super cute, so very farm vintage like. Love it. And for the background, that's all the print. And for the background, I used Blossoms Riley Blake Tone on Tone White. All of that can be found in our shop. That link is also down below. I want to tell you, you can use charm packs or 5-inch square packs. Okay, if you do that, the numbers will change. But I have used a part of a 10-inch square pack for this topper. It doesn't take the whole thing. So if you were going to use charm packs or 5-inch square packs, you would need 2 prints and 2 backgrounds. But then you'll need more yardage for the borders and etc. So I just want to give you a heads up on that. But because I did use 10-inch square pack, okay, we are going to use more of it, and I will talk again more at the end exactly what all that means. But I show you how I was cutting the 10-inch square packs in the next clip. And once I really started to assemble this, I started to realize it's just, the math wasn't completely working out to just use what I was doing if I wanted some more variation and consistency. So what I ended up doing is using my own coloring sheet. Okay, I do use these. They're very beneficial, and there's all kinds of notes on here. They're very, very beneficial. Now, of course, I colored mine in with a computer, but the one that is free is just all the lines. Okay, so you can do your own colors just to make sure that you have exactly what you need. Now, if you use charm packs, just have fun. If you're using 5-inch square packs, just sew them all. Just the sewing's the same, the cutting's the same, everything's the same. It's just the variation of color that you may want to use more of. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a heads up on that, and I do use them. It's very beneficial. Now, if you do grab this, I encourage you just to watch the whole video so that you understand how the blocks are actually assembled. So when you look at your coloring sheet, you can understand exactly what colors are needed where. Okay, so at any rate, we are going to get this started. No lies here. Let's have fun. Was there something else I needed to tell you? Notice I didn't give you the binding or the backing, and that's because this is current state. I will tell you, I think this is going to finish at 54 by 54. I'm pretty sure. So if that happens, and that's what I'm going with, it'll be a ½ yard for binding and 3 yards for backing. One more thing, that Blossoms that I did, because I used a 10-inch square pack for the print, the Tone on Tone Blossom White from Riley Blake, I cut 2 yards. Okay, and that will also give me part of the next step. So I wanted to give you a heads up on that. It's enough to do the whole topper at 48.5-inch squared plus more. Okay, so let me quit chit-chatting because I know y'all just want to know how to make this block. Isn't she pretty? It's a 9x9. It is a 9 patch. I know it's hard to tell, but this is a 9 patch. Basically, we build 9 big blocks and we put them all together. So this is a 48.5-inch squared 9 patch. So let's figure out right now how to get that done. I'll see you guys in just a sec. Okay, so I just want to talk about fabric for a minute with this particular project. I am pulling from a 10-inch square pack, poppy cotton, as I talked about before. And I will say, I believe there are 44 10-inch squares in this pack. For the center of the quilt, I will use 18, okay? So I've pulled out some fabrics. I've done 9 of this and 9 of these, and I just wanted to talk about this for just a second. There are 2 blocks that we are manipulating inside of this quilt. The first one is a half square triangle, and it's a little larger, and the second one is 4 patches, and they're a little smaller. So what I've done is some of these larger prints, they will be cut down, but I felt they would work better inside of the quilt in the half square triangles. And then these ones are smaller prints, and I think they'll work better for the 4 patches. So I wanted to talk about that. And I also did leave out, they do have some blacks. I'm thinking about using it later in the second video. We'll find out for sure. But you can use whatever you want. You can even do your own scraps. Now, whatever you choose, just make sure that your background fabric is going to allow the colors to not get, what do we call that? I'm looking for the right word. Basically, not get mashed all together and then the pattern doesn't stick out. And I am using the Blossoms Briley Blake tone on tone white, because I think it's really going, all of the colors I think will just pop very nicely. I think everything is going to work really well against the white. So you can use whatever you want, just make sure you pick something that has some contrast to the background, okay? Or the background has contrast to the layer or the 10-inch square pack that you use. So I'm going to cut this all later, and I'll explain here in just a second. All right, so I've done the 9, a larger print, and these ones are quite large, if you can see the difference here. I'm hoping that'll work. If it doesn't, I'll end up changing it out. But I'm also doing the smaller prints for the 4 patches. So we're going to start first with the half square triangles. Now what you'll need, and like I said, I'm using 9, okay? So you take one of your 10-inch squares, and I have a perfect 10 ruler, which should make life really easy. I always check my 10-inch squares against it to see how the little thingy things, the little pinking edges, how they work. And I do kind of like to clean it all up, okay? Just give it a little cleanup. Now there's a couple of ways to do this. You could, you don't even have to use a 10-inch square. You could use 2 5-inch square packs of print and 2 5-inch square packs of background. Makes it really, really easy. But I'm going to take this a little further and try to use some of the other fabric in this quilt, and you'll see that next week. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to basically cut them in fours. Now, like I said, I could line this up as best as possible on 5 inches. And if you don't want to, because of these little pinking edges, you could really line this up as best as possible and use the markings on your, what is this thing called? Your cutting mat. But I'm using the ruler and I'm trying to keep everything nice and straight. Lining up on that 5-inch mark. And I'm simply going to cut it in half. Okay. I'm going to pick up my ruler, not move the fabric, and I'm going to cut it in half again. I'm lining up on the 5-inch and I'm just simply going to cut this up into 4 equal blocks. Okay, so I have 4 5-inch squares now. You'll also need 4 5-inch of your background to go with them. So I'm going to cut all of my large prints in that way. I'm going to just cut them down into 4 5-inch squares. Okay. For the other side, let me move these out of the way because I will get confused. For the other side, for the 4 patches, what I am going to do is, again, I will check to see how this 10-inch square really lines up. And I think what I'll do is I will shave one of these on one side. Okay, and then I'll take that side and use it this way and line up on my 5 inches. Gotta love the Perfect 10 Square by Creative Grids. It really does make cutting these down a lot simpler. Okay, so you're going to want to cut them down first this way and then again this way. There's other ways to do this. You could do 2.5-inch strips and then cut those down on a 10-inch square. There's a million ways. This is the way that I'm choosing to do it. Okay, once you get it straight, cut it in half again. So now you've got the 4 5 patches. Now you could also just stack these on top of each other to do this, but with me, I am never successful when I stack anything. So basically I'm going to do that to each one of these again, but this time I'm going to the 2.5-inch mark because we're going to cut them down into 4s, each one of these 2.5 inches. Turn your ruler and another 2.5 inches. And now you've got 4 2.5-inch squares. Again, you will need 4. For every 2.5-inch square, you're going to need a background of 2.5 inches. So I'm going to take all the rest of these. There were 9 for the 2.5-inch squares and 9 for the 5-inch squares. What that means is you will need a total for your background of 36 5-inch squares and 144 2-inch squares. So, or 2.5, excuse me, 2.5-inch squares. So I'm going to get all that done off camera and then I'll bring you back for the next step. Okay. So the first thing we're going to tackle are the half square triangles, which we use the 5-inch squares for, okay? And we cut 36 of the print and 36 of the background. And I have just simply placed them right sides together. Now, if you'll notice, I do have some white showing because of the pinked edges, and that's going to be okay because it'll be in the seam. Ain't that big of a deal, guys. So we put those right sides together. Now, I've done well, not a million. I've done, I like to exaggerate. I've done a video on different methods for half square triangles, but because we're working with these 5-inch squares and I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, and I've already made it more difficult with the fabric. However, I am trying to keep it simple. We're going to leave them as 5-inch squares. I'm simply going to take my ruler, and it has to be a ruler that will spread all the way across. Now with Creative Grids, they do have a dotted line for the 1/4 inch, so it really helps a lot to be able to see. And I want to line up this corner on the dotted line, and that corner on the dotted line. And like I said, there's a million ways to do this, but this is the method that I prefer to use anyway. And I'm going to simply draw, this is a 1/4 inch, so I'm drawing a line that is a 1/4 inch away. Okay, now this is a disappearing ink. We should be good to go eventually. And then I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to line it up going the other direction. Okay. The dotted line is going down straight down the middle, and I put those corners on the dotted line. Okay. So when I draw this line, it marks a 1/4 inch. Now I am not left-handed, so this is a lot of fun. You can turn the square if you need to in the future, FYI. Okay, and if you don't want it to shift, if you find that this is where it needs to be, you can so certainly pin on either side. I'm going to not pin for now. Now, you can already see it starting to disappear. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and show you how I actually stitch along this line. Now, I will stitch to the towards the side that I'm going to cut. So I'm going to sew right along the inside towards the center of this line and on this side. Okay. And guys, I am going to chain piece. So before I take you and off camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this beautiful pile. I've already put all the right sides together. Okay. And I'm going to just take one at a time, and I'm going to put my lines on each one of these. Now I'm using a different 1/4 inch. It doesn't really matter. A 1/4 inch is a 1/4 inch, right? And it really doesn't matter if at this point, if the bottom is not perfect. When you want it perfect is when you're sewing. So I'll just sit here all 36 blocks, and I'll draw a 1/4 inch on one side and a 1/4 inch on the other side. So I line up that 1/4 inch mark corner to corner, and then I just draw another line. Okay. And again, I'll sew down this side, and I'll sew down this side towards the center, because that's the place we're going to cut. So if you sew on the side of the line right next to it, on the side that you're going to cut, it will help when you fold it over to have the right size block. But we're going to have to trim them down anyway, so everything is well. But I'll do this to each of the 36. So when I'm done, I'll just set this one on top, and I'll create a pile so that when I go to sew this, I'm going to chain piece. I'm going to take you in and show you how I do this, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I've got my pile over here. You can't see it, but, and normally I have a leader end underneath here ready to go, but I don't right now. We're just going to run with it. But you take your first block. Now you'll notice I do have my seam guide, but for these you don't need a 1/4 inch seam because we're using the lines and not the guide. Now I'm actually going to sew on this side of the line as best as possible. I'm just going to hug it along here. You always want to, and this is just my thing, this is my tip, this is what I do. I always sew closest to the side that I'm going to cut. That way when I flip this over, that thread and that fabric that takes up that seam allows the fabric to stretch all the way over. Okay, so there's a couple ways to sew this. Both ways I suggest that you don't do it through a camera. All right, so I went ahead and lowered my presser foot. I'm going to go ahead and lower my needle. I'm not going to back stitch because I don't feel like it's important right now. And again, I'll just sew right next to that line as best as I can. This will go much better when I'm not doing this with you guys. Although I love doing this with you guys. It actually makes, you know, sewing a lot more enjoyable when you get to sew with somebody, right? All right. So once I get down to the end, if I'm only going to sew one at a time, I go ahead and lift my presser foot and I'll spin her around and lower the presser foot and go ahead and sew again. Because I'm now, see, I got off because I can't see through the camera. So I'm going to sew this on closest to this side of the line. See if I can do this one better. And you could do this for each piece, but you're going to have to cut threads or move it out of the way and waste some extra thread. My preference is to do, it shifted a little. My preference is to do chain piecing. Now, when you do this chain piecing, I'm going to show you what I do and what exactly it means. So we have the two lines on each side, right? So on the rest of these, I'm going to chain piece. So what I'll do is I'll sew down this side, one side. Well, I'm going to do the other side because of the block in the back. And I'm just simply going to, on each one, so I'll show you what I mean here in just a second. Oh, my thread got caught in there. That's all right. So we've done one. Now I'm not going to clip them at this point. I'm going to grab the next one. Yeah, y'all can see. There we go. I'm going to grab the next one and sew down that. I'm going to sew down the other side. The reason is if I sew down this side, my square back here is in the way, and it really doesn't matter which side you sew first. So I'm going to do the side where it allows me to get right next to it. And I'll just do this with the rest of mine. I'm not going to clip any threads at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and sew the rest of these. I'll do one more. Again, I'm not going to clip. Now what that does is it sets you up, instead of having a leader ender, it sets your needle ready to go and not suck down any of your fabric as best as possible. It doesn't always work, but it does help. And it eliminates having to use all that thread, which is a bonus because we're always looking at ways to save money. But I'm going to go ahead and that's it. And then once I get through all of them, I'll go and I will snip this here. I'll snip the last one off, and you'll have a big long chain if you do it this way. And basically I'll spin it around and just start on the other sides, and I'll still keep them chained together. It's not going to hurt anything. And that's exactly how I will sew these all together. I will go ahead and chain piece the rest of them. So let me get this done off camera and I'll take you to the next step with these half square triangles. Okay, so once you have all of your squares sewn in 1/4 inch away from the center line on each of them, there are 36 of these, remember? I took out all my pins, and I don't know if y'all have seen this, but this is a blade saber. Super cute. The only color we have in the shop right now is the blue, but we will be getting other colors. But you use your blade that from your rotary cutter when it gets dull. Great saver tip. Great way to save your money because you know these ain't cheap, right? So I just simply take my squares and just sit very, you can watch YouTube, you can watch TV, you can watch a movie, and just sit and get rid of the little connectings. Very simple, okay? So once you've done all that, and I'll get the rest done off camera, but once you've done that, what we're going to do next to each one of these squares is now we're going to cut straight down the middle, okay? So right in between those two lines, just going to line up on a seam line on the 1/4 inch. And you could do this with a pair of scissors. It doesn't require you to use a rotary blade, but you're just simply going to cut them all in half. Okay? Very easy. Easy breezy. Not complicated. And just simply give it a cut. Okay, so you'll do that to all of them. And then what we're going to do, bring my iron over here. There we go. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to press them. Let me adjust the light here. So first thing I always do is set the seam. Okay. Very easy. Just put your iron right down on it. And then we want to press towards the dark side. So you want your dark side up on top, and you're going to press your seam to the dark side. Okay. Again, very easy. Now be careful because this is on a bias and you don't want to distort at all. And you'll want to let them cool. And you could sit and go one right after the other, set your seam, and then press. Okay, so you want to do that to all. Now we have, I don't know how many we have. 36. We still have 36. Okay. No, we cut them in two. So now we have 72 of them. All right. So you want to do that to all of them. And then what we're going to do is trim them down. So I moved the iron out of the way. Oh, I need one that's pressed. So you're going to want to press them all first. Okay. And then I use a 6.5 inch grid, creative grid ruler. And we're going to cut these down to 4.5. Okay. So I basically line up the angle between the dark and the light on the 4.5. Okay. It's kind of fun when you have these, whatever those are called, pinking edges. I don't know why I struggle with telling y'all about what those things are called. And I'm actually not, I'm going to have to trim this a couple times, I bet. And that's okay if you have to, like I do. But you're just going to want to simply cut two edges. Okay. Got a little bit of waste. Oh, I didn't go all the way through on that one. So we'll just get rid of it. Just a dog ear. I thought I should turn up the light a little bit. So that bottom corner, we're going to turn it so now it's at the top. You're going to take your ruler again, 4.5 inches. Oh, look, I'm not going to have to cut it twice. Beautiful. Get it nice and lined up so that the line is on the line. The line of the ruler is on the fabric. That probably makes a lot more sense. And then cut them again. Make sure you go through the dog ear. And you'll have a perfect 4.5 inch square. So you're going to want to do that again with all 72 of your squares. Okay, line it up on that angle. Go ahead and cut two sides. Okay. There we go. Pull that away. That bottom that was cut, we're going to turn it and put it on the top right. Again, line up on the 4.5 and on your angle. And cut the other 2 sides. So you'll do this again to all 72 of your half square triangles. Aren't they pretty? I'm looking forward to this. Can't wait to share the rest. Well, let me come back at you in just a sec for the next step. So now that we've got our half square triangles done and waiting for us to finish, I'm going to go ahead and start my 2.5 inch squares. Now, I'm not doing this the most efficient way, but if you remember, I am using my coloring sheet to guide me to make sure that I've got exactly the colorway that I want to do. So because of that, I have to sew each one of these on their own, which makes a great leader ender project because you're just going to have to sew all of these together. What do you call these? 2.5 inch squares. So we're going to take a print, and of course this is right side up. Okay. And we're going to take our right side of our background fabric and we're just going to put it right on top. And it doesn't matter really at the end of the day if you put the pinks or the printed side on top or the white on top, just so long that they're both right sides together. Okay. And I'll sit here and get all of my squares onto my fabric with the right sides together. And I wanted to show you this one. This is another one. You'll see the pink edge that it is not quite as long as the white, the background. However, it's going to be okay because it'll be in a seam. Okay. So I just want to make you aware that sometimes the pink edges do some crazy things, but I'll sit here and then I'll take these all and I'll sew one side with a 1/4 inch seam, one side straight down, and I'm going to chain piece them one right after the other, meaning I'm not going to break threads until all of these are sewn together, which I think there are 144 of them. So yes, that's what we're going to do next. And I'm going to do that off camera. And so then I will come back at you with the next step. Okay. So once you have all 144 of your 2.5 inch squares sewn together, right along that 1/4 inch, I again will set the seam. Okay. And we're going to press them all. Your 1/4 inch seam, we're going to press to the dark side on every single one of them. So set your seam and then press to the dark or the print, because maybe your background's dark. So you want to press to the print. Okay. For mine, it is the dark because I chose the white as my background. Now, if y'all remember, I used my coloring sheet. So I've pulled these 4 out to show you basically what I'm going to be doing. And I'm using my coloring sheet as a guide. So on mine, we're going to build 4 patches. Okay, taking your 2.5 inch strips. Let me turn this light up just a bit. Okay, we're going to take these 2.5 inch they're now 2.5 by 4.5. This is what they should measure. Okay. And I need a dark green with a light pink for one. Okay. And then on this one, I need a dark pink with a yellow. Okay. And and then I put a little tag. So after I get them all pressed, I'm going to go through each one and I'm just going to start layering them one on top of the other. Okay. But it is going to be important that you make sure when you're doing this, and maybe you do one at a time to keep it straight if you're using your coloring sheet as a guide, but then you will flip them over. And because we pressed to the print, your seam is going to nest so beautifully. And just make sure that you remember which side. Well, I guess it really doesn't matter. What you're going to do is you're going to nest them together, and you can pin them if you really want to make sure that they stay nice and even. You don't have to if you're comfortable without pinning. But I pin to the right and then to the left of my seam. And I'm just going to take this and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch right along here for the first 4 patch. So I will go through each of these. Basically, when you are building, no matter how you do this, what you do want to be careful of is that you don't have the same color. Like for instance, let me pull one. You don't want to do that, okay? You don't want the same print, same color kind of thing going on. So you want to make sure that they do stay a little different. So I'm going to get all of my 4 patches made and in the correct area, and then we're going to talk about the next step. So I will see you guys in just a sec. All right, so when you have all your 4 patches and all your half square triangles all ready to go, then we're going to go to the next step. But as you all saw, I did put a little text message saying, stop, don't do your 4 patches. The reason is I was showing you the wrong direction. So when you go to sew your 4 patches together, when you have 2 2.5 inch squares sewn, again, press to the print, 2 2.5 inch squares, again, press to the print. That didn't change. What is different is when you go to add them together, make sure that the one you want is on top left. There's a print on the top left and a print on the bottom right. And then when you sew these 2 together, you're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam and you're going to press towards the top. Okay? I showed you all like this. Okay? That was incorrect. And the reason is now I've done some like this, so now I know, right? It won't all matchy and allow you to nest. If you do it like this and you press going up, when you put the 2 together or the 4 together, you press this seam right here going up. Okay? We're going up. Then everything should nest. However, another thing that you need to do is when you start to put these things together, there is a right way and a wrong way. Okay? So I'm going to show you the right way. And this is so very important. You're going to take one of your half square triangles, and it needs to be where the big triangle is on the left, the background big triangle is on the left, the print big triangle is on the right, and your point is down here at the bottom left. You will then take your 4 patch, pull this up just a little bit, okay, and you'll place it right underneath, just like this. It's so very important. Every block needs to be constructed like this so it will work and everything will nest, okay? So you're going to put the 2 just like this. Now typically people would flip this over just like so and sew this line because of the seam. However, because this is a half square triangle, my machine, can eat my half square triangles at times. So I actually take the top block just like so, and I flip it down. And I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam right here, okay? And to make sure I do the right one before I take it to the sewing machine, I'll put a clip or a pin or something to tell me this is the side. This is so important that you get the right side. What's really nice about this part is there's no nesting seams, okay? You're just going to need to match them up. So your 1/4 inch seam line, so we take this one with the top left being a print and your half square triangle with the top right being your print. You'll take the top, flip it to the bottom, and then you'll just pin it or tack it or clip it or something to let you know which side needs to be sewn together. Okay, so once you have all of that together, pull this all out of the way. What you're going to have is a couple of blocks like, whoop, let me turn that down just a bit. Wow, that really blinded you out. Sorry about that. Okay, so you're going to have, this is my seam line. I know it's probably hard to see, but that's my seam line. I'm going to want to flip it over so that the 4 patch is on top. At this point, I'm going to set my seam, okay? And I'm going to press going towards the 4 patch. So my seam is going towards the 4 patch. And when you flip this over, what you should have is this seam going up and this seam going towards the 4 patch. Towards the half square triangle, towards the 4 patch. Okay, so I'll do one more with you. All right. Then we'll just lift it up. Whoop, wrong side. That could have been disastrous. Set the seam and press towards the 4 patch. Okay? Very good. So, once you've done all of your patches like that, what you're going to start to do is you're going to start to put these together. And this, whoop, let me move this up just a bit. This is what your block is actually going to look at. This is what we're going to repeat over and over and over, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and take the top and flip it over, and the only seam at this point is the middle one, okay? I've just pressed these and they need to sit, but that's okay. So I will take a pin in the middle on the right side of the seam and a pin on the left of the seam. Okay. You could pin on the corners if you like, but you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam right along here. Okay, removing your pins as you go. And if you do it this way, you need to watch that this seam down here does not flip. Okay. So, put your blocks together as such. This print triangle goes over to the top left. Print triangle goes to the bottom right. These should be also forming an angle. So you've got an angle here, an angle here, and an angle here. This is the block that gets repeated over and over and over. When you're done sewing these together, don't press this seam yet, okay? I want to talk about a few things, but I need to set you up on my cutting board because it's a lot bigger space, and I think it will be, I need to show you all of this, okay? So in the meantime, that will be our next step. Now remember, I have been using a coloring sheet, so I actually have an order to my madness. But what you want to make sure when you're putting, let me pull that back out one more time. When you're putting these things together, you don't want these to be the same, okay? And you don't want these to be the same. I actually don't know that these on mine are actually the same or not. It just depends. I don't think they are. I don't think these are the blocks that need to go together. But it's very important that you try to keep things different for some sanity. Okay, so I will get set up for the next step. I will make sure and have some more of this all done for you. I'll get you set up on my pressing board up in the air there so that I can show you what the next step is. But this is your block, guys. Isn't that exciting? So I'll see you guys in just a sec. Okay, so I wanted to bring you in just to try to explain some pressing ideas, just so I can help make this so much easier for you guys, especially when sometimes you make your own little mistakes. And if I can share that with you, it just makes your life a little easier, right? This is not a complicated block. It's just all about organization. So I did tell you to hold off on pressing. This was the block I was sharing with you earlier. We are building these into this arrangement. Okay, so I've said to take one of your half square triangles and sew them to your 4 patch. It has to be in this direction, okay? Your half square triangle must look like this, and your 4 patch must look like that. And when you sew these together, you will press them going towards the 4 patch, okay? So all of these have been pressed towards the 4 patch, okay? All these individual strips. But now we are going to take them and sew them together. So you take the top part, because this is your block. This is what the block looks like, just like so. And basically, as you can see, we just turn them in certain directions, okay? This is the block. These two are the same direction, and these two are the same direction. It gives us this nice little diamond in the middle, and it starts to form diamonds in other places, okay? Very, very cool pattern that this comes out to. Okay, so you'll just take the top part, you'll flip it over. When you do this, the only thing that nests is the very middle. This doesn't have anything to nest to. Nothing else has anything to nest to. So we talked about that. So I'm going to pull you along here. Let me pick this up. All right, and because what I've done is a whole nother block where I have sewn them together. So now we're going to talk about, we've got 4 units now instead of 8. So it's 8 halves equal 4 blocks. This is the actual block, okay? So I haven't pressed this one. What I want you to notice is I can tell, I know you can't, but I can tell which one of these have been pressed and which haven't, okay? So what that means is this block has been, hold on, I gotta figure it out. Yep, okay. This is part of the block. This one was pressed this way, and this one was pressed this way. So when we match it up next to this block, to be honest, yep, this one has been pressed this way. This one has been pressed this way. This is where I sewed. Yep. Okay. So understanding that this one's already pressed, I want to press this new stitched seam going the opposite direction. Okay. These, yep, this one's been pressed. This one's been pressed. So I want to press these. Well, hold on. Let me think about this. Oh, basically the middles haven't been pressed, right? So this one, well, it feels pressed, but is it? No. This one will need to go this way. The new one. So basically what I'm telling you is lay them back out. Decide how you like them. Now, again, when you lay it out, you want to make sure that each one of these are different, okay? No matter what you choose. Now, they might be like the same print, but these are different colors, okay? So just enough difference to keep that contrast and the pattern alive is what you're looking for. And if you'll see here, all my middles are different. All my outsides are different. And that's going to create other secondary patterns inside of this quilt. So when you're lining these things, that's why I like using the coloring sheet. You just got to really be careful with the coloring sheet. Let me tell you, you got to be careful with it. But it'll help you map out how you like to do this. Now, if you were just using that 5-inch square pack, you can just when you're putting your original half or blocks together, just play. Have fun with it, okay? Because there's enough variation that you don't have to worry too much. It works out great. I still personally, because I'm so methodical, I personally would lay it out, but that's just me. But that's a lot of laying out, right? So basically, don't press any which way until you've laid it out and you can see, you know, this one's already been pressed. So this middle here, I need to line up according to what is above it or what's next to it, okay? And that will tell you which way to press. That's the bottom line. So I went ahead and did that. Now, if you'll notice, I've got a tag because mine are numbered because I have a certain place for all of mine to go. The next step, once you get all that done, well, should probably wait here. Pull that back out. Once you figure out all your pressing, because you don't want to move forward until you have everything pressed. Okay. The next step that I do is I go ahead and sew the top together. Now see, you can tell I have to press this one, right? So you'll sew the tops together. And if you pressed correctly, everything should nest. Then you sew the two halves on the bottom together. If you pressed correctly, everything should nest. All right. Now remember, I have a couple faux pas on mine because I wasn't thinking. All right. So I've sewn on this block, I've sewn my top and my bottom together. So everything else is pressed except for this line right here. What I've been doing is on the top, it goes to the right, and on the bottom, it goes to the left. And that'll make sure that when you start to put all of the 9 patch together, everything will nest. Okay, so again, and the way that I'm remembering this, if you're on top, you're always right. I know that sounds silly, but that way I know the top goes to the right, the bottom goes to the left. Once you have that done, okay, this one, I need to press again. Didn't let it sit long enough. Yep. Okay, so then you'll have this, and then you just simply take and you'll put the top on the bottom, and if you have pressed correctly, everything will nest. Everything, okay? Two things I want to add to this last one. When you go to press, when you go to sew, these will nest also, okay? If you've pressed correctly, these will also nest. Anytime you're sewing a junction where your half square triangles, the points are meeting, because they're a little different. I'll have to take a picture of that little point. But they will nest, because one will go one way and one will go the other. But there's a lot of fabric right here. So when you're sewing over that part of that seam, take it slow and try to keep your 1/4 inch consistent, because it's got a lot of bulk right here. Okay, that's the first and foremost thing that I wanted to share. Once you are done, okay, I would wait to press this seam till the very end, where you know which block is going to go where. Now I'm only doing 9 of these, so I'm going to have a 9 patch. So what I'm doing is for every row we have 1, 2, 3 blocks, correct? So on the first block, I am pressing down. On the middle blocks, I'm pressing them up. And on the last block, I'm pressing them down. And that will allow them to nest to each other going crossways. This one, we said to the right and to the left always, and that will allow them to nest going vertical, okay? So I did want to share that. And basically where you're going is making, like I said, the way that I have mapped out the math for all of the fabric, 9 can be made for sure. You can make a lot more with a 10-inch square pack. You can, but I'm going to use them later, and we're going to talk about that in the next clip. But this is where you're going. All your pretties are going to make this, and as you can see, there's our block. So we've got the 2 half square triangles and the angle, 2 half square triangles and the 4 patches making an angle. This is a block and this is a block. So you're taking that one single block and making this gorgeous larger block. Now, this will finish at 16.5 unfinished, excuse me, before it goes in the quilt. It will be 16.5 inch squared, okay? Just to give you an idea on where you're going. So everything will press and it will lay flat if you've pressed correctly. All right, so I'm going to get all these little squigglies, and you know, I really wanted to be able to put this on a design board, but I had so many small pieces, I was afraid I'd be chasing them onto the floor and picking them up more than I would be helping talk about this. So I hope this was helpful, but I will see you guys with a finished centerpiece in just a sec. Okay, so here she is, finally finished, woohoo! Now, if you'll notice, it is just the centerpiece. So when you look at a Jewel Box quilt, typically they will have a border that matches the background. Well, usually, but definitely a lot of different ones have piano borders on the outside of that. So next week, just to keep this video a little shorter, next week I'm going to add the borders with you. So if you're interested in a piano border, maybe you're new and you're not sure what a piano border is, I will make sure to do that with you next week. It'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, this was interesting. I will be real honest because I'm always transparent. This is a lifesaver. I've got notes all over the place on it, but I did not use my design board, and I had one block flip, and I'm looking at the quilt. Let me see. And when that happened, it's hard for me to tell. It's this one right here. So it should have been red and yellow. This should have been, one of these should have been pink. One of the yellows should have been a pink. But I switched the block, one of the blocks. It got spun, and it really put a tailwind in it. And I ended up putting on my, I have my cutting table in front of the design board, so I'm pushing it out of the way and getting it hung up so I could finish it. So this really does help. So if you're interested though in getting your own coloring sheet, it is on my website under inspirations tab. So if you click on that, it will, and there's a link for the list of inspirations down below, but it's there for you. It is free. But it gives you a coloring sheet, and it just tells you some basic information about the quilt. And remember, this is not quite finished. I'm actually going to do borders. I'm kind of excited about it. So hope this was helpful. Hope this was fun. Hope it's inspirational. I know that jewel boxes are usually very striking with jewel type colors, but they're not all like that. And this was my little country version. So I actually like it. At any rate, again, I hope this was inspirational. I will be on Facebook Live at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time today. And hope you'll stop by and say hello. But until next time, guys, may you all continue to be inspired, productive, ever so joyful. Never stop believing, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. Happy quilting. Happy Wednesday. See y'all soon.